Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first series of the Forum on the Quest for the Meaning of Life. And we are very, very lucky to have found 12 outstanding speakers who has made a journey to quest for their meaning of life and to share with us what they have found. And this evening, the first series, I'm going to introduce two outstanding speakers. But before that, I'm going to share a few slides for you. All right. So, okay, I want to just make some quotes about the quest for the meaning of life from various sources, but just as a reference to get to the main point where the speaker will talk about. And the first one is the meaning of life is to give life meaning by Viktor Frankl, who wrote the famous book, The Man's Search for the Meaning of Life, explaining how he found the meaning of life during the worst case when he was in the concentration camp, where he lost his coat, his shoes, and during the freezing weather. All right. And the other one is by great philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." And the other one is by the poet Marianne Williamson, which I quote part of it. "And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others." This quote was also included in Nelson Mandela's inauguration ceremony. Then I quote another one by Nadine Stair, who wrote a poem at 85. It's a long one, I just quote a few. Basically, he said, "If I have the life to live over again, I would bear my foot, early. If I have my life to live over again, I will perhaps have more actual troubles, but fewer imaginary ones. You see, I'm one of those people who are sensible and sane, hour after hour, day after day. Oh, I've had my moments. If I had to do it over again, I will have more of them. In fact, I try to have nothing else, just moments, one after another, instead of living so many years ahead of each day." I'm 84, so I can share her feelings very well. Then I would like to quote a few phrases for chapter 1 of Tao Te Ching. "Tao, the way that can be spoken of, is not the constant Tao. The name that can be named is not the constant name. Nameless is the origin of heaven and earth, the name of the mother of all things. Thus, the constant void enables one to observe the true essence. The constant being enables one to see the outward manifestations. These two come paired from the same origin. But when the essence is manifested, it has different name. The same origin is called the profound mystery. As profound the mystery as can be, it is gate to the essence of our life." And usually, in Tao Te Ching, we use the Tai Chi diagram to express it. It's very much similar to the notion of interest net from Buddha's text. Given that, I'd like to now introduce our speaker. I think the speakers tonight is going to talk about the notion of harmony with the Tao in expressing their quest for meaning. And the two speakers are outstanding. And unfortunately, I don't have a long time to express all their achievement. But Reverend Heng Sure is chairman of the board of Dharma Run Buddhist Association, as well as the director of Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. Years ago, as a young monk, he and another monk, Dharma Master Heng Chao, took an unusual pilgrimage to seek world peace by making a bow to the ground every 3 steps. The pilgrimage, which began in South Pasadena and ended in Ukiah, California, covered a distance of 800 miles and took 2 years and 6 months from 1997 to 1979. Indeed, Reverend Heng Sure, after he arrived at City of 10,000 Buddhas, he continued to bow and kept in silence for many months. I won't go into detail to express all of his achievement in terms of the Dharma. He is also a musician, which he'll show you a little bit of his talent this evening. And the second speaker is Mr. Nipun Mehta, who is founder of the Service Space, and incubator a project that supports gift culture. In his mid-20s, Nipun quit his job to become a full-time volunteer. And over the last 15 years, his work has reached millions, with more than 500,000 volunteers, and mushroomed into numerous projects. Nipun's mission statement in life reads, "Bring smiles to the world and stillness in my heart." And both speakers have accomplished so much, and we're very, very happy that they're here with us. And also want to thank our translator, Dr. Lan Huang, who will be providing simultaneous translation to Chinese. With that, I would like to invite our two speakers to start.
Namo fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Priscilla, for the invitation and for giving us the setup for tonight's talk. I'm thrilled to be able to share the podium with Nipun. We have been friends since the earliest years of the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. It's been decades now, and I've grown to know the entire family and consider them. I must be doing something good in my life to have friends like these. And so, Nipun, I think it's a testimony to the quality of our game that we have a PhD as our translator. How about that? So
that is true.
Gratitude to Huanglan for taking the time to allow other folks to listen in. So great topic, meaning in life, 人生的意义，那个主题了。So when I was growing up, that question was considered a joke. Why? It was the kind of thing that eggheads pondered over. You know, what is the meaning in life? It was a stereotype of somebody who had too much time on their hands, and it was a colossal waste of time, you know. And you talked about it in the back room of a fraternity house after a 6-pack of beer. You know, what's the meaning? And that was kind of that. And it was obvious what the meaning of life was when I was a teenager. It was baseball and girls. That was mostly what it was all about, you know. So clearly I was clueless. I had no idea what it was about. And what I was interested in was being strong. I wanted to know what was real strength. And most of the models available in popular culture at the time were either violent or cruel. Cowboys who were lonely, alienated, wandering, hadn't found it, or secret agents, super spies, who were, cruel and absolutely had no virtue whatsoever. Kiss, kiss, bang, bang was what it was about. And while I wanted to be strong like that, it was clear that there was something missing, because it was all outside. And those men, that way of being a man, didn't have many moments of happiness that communicated to me. It didn't touch the heart. And then there was an important television program, and people my age who grew up who had television back in the boomers days will remember Kung Fu. Kung Fu was a martial arts Western, and David Carradine wandered over the West as Cain, who had trained at Shaolin Monastery. And so he was a cowboy, but he was not a violent cowboy. He resolved his conflicts with his fists, but never to kill, just to subdue. And there was something going on. And famous quotes like, "Choose wisely, grasshopper," that came out of Kung Fu. And so here was the search for what was important at this point moved inward. And here was a new story being told in mass culture in America, which was, there is meaning to be found inside. So that was, I think many people my generation had the first awareness of another story being told with the arrival of Kung Fu, which, by the way, it's on YouTube, KUNGFU. Go take a look at David Carradine. So then I walked away from my Methodist Protestant background and started to, with the arrival of the Dao De Jing that Ray just quoted, I started to discover new stories, different stories that had meaning. And what I discovered was that I discovered Zen, and I started to meditate. And what happened was the search turned not to material things, because what was important, there was an important thing happening in my community growing up, which was, if you ask someone what was the meaning of life, they would say probably a house on the lake and a boat. You get a house on the lake and a boat, that's it, you can die. You've got all the important symbols of wealth and having made it. That was what was important when for a lot of folks. And I thought, yeah, but again, the people who I know who attained those symbols didn't necessarily find happiness. So the macho tough guy strength didn't hit the spot. And the strength through accumulation, the idea that whoever dies with the most toys is the winner, that idea, that seemed kind of bankrupt as well. So when I found Kung Fu and Cain, and then I found meditation, that was important. It's not necessarily in the stuff. There's something else. What is it? Satori, Kensho, enlightenment. Aha, that's what I wanted. Happiness must be there as soon as you get that. So I started in the words of Houston Smith, Professor Houston Smith, the late and beloved professor of religious studies and author. He said he was whoring after enlightenment. Whatever it would take, whatever he could sell to get enlightened, he would sell it, steal it, whatever. Me too. And then I realized at some point that it was no different. It was only an immaterial goal to get happiness. If you got it and lost it, what then? So I had to keep looking. Then I found a story called the Ulambana story. There's a Buddhist holiday once a year called Ulambana, which is a ceremony based on a Buddhist story of a man named Moha Mu Jianlian or Mulian, Mahamad Gayayana in Sanskrit. Mahamad Gayayana got enlightened. He got that thing that I thought I wanted. But the first thing he did, this is what surprised me. what he found meaningful was looking for his mother so he could repay her kindness for having raised him to a position where he could step aside from acquisition, step aside from phony strength, brittle strength, and find what really mattered in the heart. And that was kindness. So here was a story that really resonated with me. It's the first time I'd ever thought that that was possible, was that by coming into life, I have received gifts. And what a child, when he or she wakes up, what is an appropriate, righteous thing to do is to follow your heart and give back, to repay kindness. In Chinese, they call it 知恩报恩. You recognize kindness done to you, and then you want to repay it. So that was, for the first time, that really made sense to me. This was meaningful. This was a reason to, you could say, get out of bed. So then I started bowing. This is the end of my first segment here, but I started bowing. And while I was bowing on the pilgrimage that Ray mentioned, things came to mind, things popped up. And what I saw was I had been given gifts by my father that were important and really were milestones in my maturing as a man, but they weren't, interestingly, they were tools. The things that meant the most to me were musical instruments, a baritone ukulele, and then a Mexican classical guitar by Geronimo Villafan called La Michoacana from Mexico, and then a golf bag so I could join his foursome. Those were the gifts that, while I was bowing, came to mind. I thought, boy, that's wonderful. I need to find a way to repay that kindness. So that's all from me. I'm going to ask Nipun, tell me about what are the milestones along the path towards discovering the meaning of life?
There it is. Well, it's beautiful. Thank you, Reverend Heng Sure. As you were talking about the substantial gifts you received, I can't help but think that one of the most substantial gifts I've received is those Tuesday mornings when I would drop off the food that my wife had cooked, and we would hang out over the staircases of the monastery and have these profound conversations. So I think that's been an incredibly substantial gift, and I don't even know how I can ever repay it back, but I try to pay it forward. It's it's been a remarkable journey over these last couple of decades, even that we've known each other. You've seen me from having hair to no hair, probably a beard at some point, but I think if I reflect on my journey, I think I started, there's that famous Howard Thurman quote, go out and don't ask so much what the world needs. Go out and do what makes you come alive, because what the world needs most are people who have come alive. And I think if I look at that from my lens in my early years, that's what I was doing. I was like, well, let's just do what makes you come alive. And what ended up making me come alive was giving. Sure enough, there's that beautiful story. I think Jacob Needleman shares this story when he was in a classroom and he asked people, where have you learned generosity? And this guy raises his hand and he says, I learned it from my 5-year-old. And I said, I took him to his roots in Mexico. We were outside. I think it was the day before Christmas. I'd just given him his gifts. It was past midnight. And he was all excited about it. And the next morning, one of the kids from the neighborhood slums walks by. And, I look at my son and I say, why don't you, son, give him one of your toys? Why don't you share? And the son says, okay, initially he's like, no, I just got these. I don't want to share. He kind of throws a tantrum, and then he sees that, dad's a little serious. And he goes and picks up a toy. And at that point, he's a smart kid. So he was like, let me pick my least favorite toy of all the gifts I got yesterday. And dad sees this, and dad gently, but, firmly says, son, not that one. Give him your favorite toy. and you know, of course, there was a lot of drama and the kids crying and all of that. But he does it. And when he goes out to the door with his toy and he's going to give it away, when he comes back, the dad is scheming all these different ideas, you know, like how should I, you know, maybe I'll give my son another one of those. I'll promise this, I'll promise that. He's thinking all these strategies, you know, to encourage his son to give. And his son comes back and look, you know, with like a big smile on his face, looks his dad in the eye and says, "Dad, that was amazing. Can I do it again?"
Wow.
And that, all right, that is something that goes beyond even maybe language and thought and all kinds of internal frameworks that we might have. And it's just something so natural and innate. And I mean, I don't know if that was my, you know, I don't know if at 5 I would have had that experience, but maybe at 25, you know, I tried and I gave a little bit, and as I gave a little bit, I kept thinking, oh, you know, this feels right. Like I should give a little more. And I gave a little more, and I was like, oh, this feels right. Give a little bit more, you know. And I just kept giving and giving. And I'm sure my dad is probably thinking, okay, you've given away all your favorite toys. Are you sure you want to give that last one too? You know, so we'll have to see what my dad would say to that. But actually, they both encouraged me, and it was it's been a remarkable journey. So I would say that for the first part, you know, I was trying to do what I love. And I think that's very powerful because you know, and initially you love different things, and then you realize, well, actually, I love to give. And there's a kind of process that you go through, because at some point I was like giving my time. At first you give whatever material resources, then you give your time. And after that, you're like, you know, trying to give. I'm like, how can I give more? And I said, well, how can I have more capacity, more space? And so I was like, well, I'm working. Can I live simply instead of like having financial security and use that time to give? And, you know, that sounds like a rational, sane idea. But when you actually do it, like I went to my boss and I told him, okay, I want to quit. And my boss is like, okay, here's extra money. What do you want? And I was like, no, I don't want anything. I'm very happy here, but I just have a different calling. And he understood, and I mean, not really, but he sort of did. He was like, you know, okay, you know, you're cut from a different cloth. He sort of had that, he knew me in that way. But then when I packed up all my stuff, and I still remember this moment, I packed up all the things I had, put it in my little box, and I took it out to my car, and it was the last time. And at that time, I didn't know anybody who had done anything like it. You know, this is like the .com heyday, like everyone's making millions, and I'm walking away from all of that. And it's like, is this the right move? I don't know. I'm sort of jumping, and I don't even know what's on the other side of the fence, but it kind of feels right, and it kind of feels scary too. And so I remember I had this box of my things. I had given up my key card, and it's the last. I'm walking out, and I put my box in the trunk, and I get in my car and I turn it on, and you know, I don't know if this is appropriate to quote this song in front of a monk, you know, or very many monks and nuns. Yeah. It's by a rapper, but I turned on the key, and you know, this was a song that was playing on the radio, and it was Eminem saying, and the lyrics at that specific moment were, will the real Slim Shady please stand up, please stand up, please stand up. You know, it's like a rap song. And I said to myself, you know, will the real Nipun Mehta please stand up, please stand up, please stand up. And I just started crying, you know, and that was a powerful moment for me to realize that, well, what is it exactly that, you know, you do what you love, but what exactly do you love to do? You know, so I would say my journey kind of took 3 phases. First was doing what I love. And then after a while of doing that, I kind of got to the second phase, which was just loving what I do, right? Like just everything. You realize that everything sort of has the same potential. I don't need to just go to a homeless shelter and give there. I can give everywhere. I can blow the leaves in my backyard if it's the same, you know, with the same spirit, and it can be just as satisfying because we live in a vastly interconnected world. And so that was sort of my second phase. And I would, you're just like happy doing the chores of the house, and it feels just as great as doing it for somebody else. So we just had a friend over, and he needed to do the laundry, and I was like, I did it for him. I folded it, I put it in his bag, and he was like, oh my God, like, why? Nobody's done that for me. Why would you do that? And I was like, well, it just brings me joy. It was like just as much joy as anything else on the outside. And it just becomes like, you just start loving everything you do. And I would say the third stage would be where it's no longer even about love. It's no longer about like, doing what you love or loving what you do. You just do what you do. And it's because you don't need the extra sort of, layers of even, I don't want to say meaning, but I don't know what the right understanding of it is. Maybe Reverend Heng Sure can elaborate, but it was almost like, there's a beautiful sign at CTTB in the kitchen. It says, life is an endless series of dishes, and I vow to do them all. Right. I don't know if it's still there, but when I was there once, I saw it there. And that's just it's like, yeah, everything sort of starts to feel the same way, and not in a boring sort of a way. And I think when you just do what needs to be done, it's more that because you're empty, the winds of nature flow through you, and the song that needs to be sung starts to play through you. And that becomes, and you don't even know it, and you don't even need to know it. And that becomes a very beautiful way to be. So that's sort of been, my arc around this. And in fact, I was gonna, when we were thinking about this, I was thinking that maybe Reverend Heng Sure can offer a song, because he's got like just the perfect song for so many unique occasions. And so I had a special request for a song.
Yeah. I can do that. I got my trusty banjo here, and the song is called "I Have Enough," and it's an English language mantra for countering greed. And we haven't talked about greed yet, because it's kind of like the fart in the church. It's like, oops, there's the shadow. Oh, greed. And yet it's so important in my experience of, taking a very wholesome thing and turning it into something very unsatisfying. Why? Where did that come from? That I want more. I want more. I want mine, and I want yours too, right? So anyway, this is a mantra which, when greed rises, the Buddha called it a poison, right? The poison of greed. When this rises in the mind, you can recite this mantra, and it goes, I have enough. Not only do I have enough, I'm grateful for what I have. Not only am I grateful for what I have, but I want to share it with you. And then hallelujah. Hallelujah is God is good. May all be fed. May all things flourish. May all awaken. Bodhi Svaha. May we all wake up together, and may it be auspicious. Here we go. I have enough. I am grateful. Share the blessings. Hallelujah. May all be fed. May all things flourish. May all awaken. Bodhi Svaha. I have enough. I am grateful. Share the blessings. Hallelujah. May all be fed. May all things flourish. May all awaken. Bodhi Svaha. Now this is your time. You got to sing along. They say it'll do you no harm, right? I have enough. I am grateful. Share the blessing. Share the blessings. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. May all be fed. May all be fed. May all things flourish. May all things flourish. May all awaken. Bodhi Svaha. Bodhi Svaha.
That's so wonderful.
Keep reciting
Yeah,
that, and greed has nowhere to stand.
That's right. And that's an important point. I think, that greed sort of creeps in. I remember a quote by Gandhi. He says, there's enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. And it's a very subtle thing to figure out what is need and what is greed. And I think, Reverend Heng Sure, maybe we can sort of broaden into from the personal. We shared our personal stories, but maybe we can think a little bit about the collective. I think one kind of question is, how can I give more? How can I come out of my greed? How can I, achieve greater happiness? But I think there's a second kind of question that is related to it, and that is, who do I have to be so others can give? Who do I have to be so others can practice, virtue and more easily, and so others can be happy? And we know, like science tells us, that we're actually all deeply embedded in networks. That when even Reverend Heng Sure singing right now, if we were on stage, those choirs that sing together, even though they have no physical contact, their heartbeats start to synchronize. Correct. And not only have they shown that, they say that actually even the audience, if there's an incredible resonance, the audience heartbeats all starts to synchronize. Even a couple staying at home, if they're in sync, their breathing patterns start to synchronize. So we see this, and we also know. There's so much. Nicholas Christakis at Harvard has done so much research on this, on networks, and how obesity spreads in networks, divorce spreads in networks, cancer spreads in networks. So does happiness, so does philanthropy, so does good news, which means that if I have friends that meditate, I'm more likely to meditate. If I have friends that are, exercising, I'm more likely to exercise. And so we are social creatures. And so this question around, we say we can singularly ask this question. Well, there's giving, and there's all these clouds of greed, and how do I overcome it so I can find greater meaning and so I can progress? And then there's a deeper question of, well, how do I support other people in doing that? And how is that related to my own journey? And I think there's some really interesting things to unpack as you go from personal meaning to collective meaning, and how those inform each other. So I wonder, Reverend Heng Sure, if you have reflections on that.
I do. This is an eternal question. And when I was kind of mocking it at the start as being the kind of question that a college freshman might, for the first couple times, his mind cracks open, her mind cracks open. She asks, what is the meaning in life? And I remember a professor in my freshman year in college, Professor Rosemont said, ask not what is the meaning of life, but instead ask, what is the meaning in life? To change the preposition. And suddenly our question assumes that meaning is there to be found, but we have to unpack it. We have to work for it. We have to cultivate it. And our founder of DRBA, Master Shren Hua, before he would start his lectures, he would address us. He would say, 你们各位修道的人, you cultivators of the Tao, cultivators of the way. That's how he addressed us. So to discover how do I prepare myself? How do I make myself worthy of offerings? Monks have a name. They're called Fu Tian Seng, field of blessings monks. The idea being that a big part of a monk's job, of a monastic's job, monk or nun, is to allow others to give to us, so that we, as purified vessels, one would hope we aspire to be, the act of giving to a monastic food, clothing, shelter, medicine, is a creator of blessings. You plant blessings in the field that is the monk. So it's a social contract. Now we're in relationships. So this act of giving is now much bigger. Now it's as you said, we're carrying it into a social realm. So the how do I prepare myself to receive cleanly, purely, without tainting it with greed or preference or dislike? You know, oh, I don't like that flavor of I like chocolate milk, and I'm getting, you know, I'm now into almond milk. They're giving me cows. You know, you don't have those thoughts as a monk, as a field of blessings. So these are thoughts that people have been pursuing for as long as humanity has been, you know, trying to find meaning in life. And one of the most profound and useful, where the sandal hits the pavement, right, where the rubber hits the road, this is one of the most useful documents I've ever found to describe when people do things right, and giving is a process of finding harmony with the Tao inside, is called 孔子礼运大通篇, the great commonwealth of peace and prosperity by Confucius. And let me just read it. And I'd like to hear Nipun's reflections on it. Confucius, this is a 5th century BCE, contemporary of the Buddha. He said, when the great Tao, when the Da Dao, 之行也, when the great Tao is practiced, everything is shared in common. The virtuous and the able are chosen for public office. Integrity and friendliness are valued by all. People cherish not only their own parents and children, but cherish the children and parents of others as well. The elderly live their last lives in happiness. Able-bodied adults are usefully employed. Children are properly reared. Widowers, widows, orphans, the childless aged, the crippled and the ailing are all well cared for. All men share their social responsibilities. All women have their respective roles. Natural resources are fully used for the benefit of all, not wasted or appropriated for selfish ends. Got oil spill? BHP? So people want to contribute their strength and ability to society for the public good and not for private gain. Trickery and cheating could not occur in such a society. Robbery, banditry, rebellions, and other crimes all disappear. Gates and doors are not even locked. No one ever thinks of stealing. This is the age of the great commonwealth of peace and prosperity.
Wow.
So
Wow.
what do you think? That's a 2,500-year-old document about giving and the relationships that can grow from that kind of giving.
Amazing. I mean, first of all, I think I just wonder, I mean, you look at that and you say, you know, we think we've changed a lot and we have progressed and we have new problems now in the world, but maybe some of the fundamental things stay quite fundamental. Yeah, I was just thinking how it's really the opposite of Confucius is saying that instead of privatizing everything, we really have to think about the commons, right? We really have to learn to share. And how do we do that? And I think there's a fine line between inclusion and boundaries. And if you just focus on like narrowing that boundary, you know, like instead of thinking 7 generations and thinking, how is my decision going to affect 7 generations down the road? You're just thinking, you're not even your own business partner, you're trying to con them out of a deal, you know, and everything just becomes way too transactional. And so how do we turn the tide from transaction towards something that's a lot deeper, right? Relationships and ultimately transformation and trust, which is how you get to the commons. You know, what was very interesting, we've actually been doing this series on Gandhi and dialogues with Gandhi, and it's based on this idea of law of love. And he says something very interesting. Well, first of all, he says that the law of love, he actually has more faith in it than the law of gravity and electricity. So it's not like a sentimental, like Hollywood thing that you hear about. He says it actually works with great scientific precision, but we just haven't evolved as humanity to really uncover these principles. So the whole series is on that, but it's actually rooted in something very interesting at a social level, if you think about it. He says, he talks about like these 5 strengths. He calls them Panch Shakti, which is sort of 5 fingers in a way, if you want to use that as a metaphor. And he says, this is your thumb, is your community. That's the most important. Then you have the education, then you have business, then you have the nonprofit sector. And then the pinky finger is governance, right? Is leadership. And so the smallest is leadership. And I find that to be very interesting. And I feel like it's connected to our theme here, which is around harmony with the Tao. That, why would you have, governance be the smallest? And part of it is that it's because you outsource a lot of the self-organizing to nature. You don't put it on the shoulders of your ego, because then the bigger the problem, the bigger your ego needs to be, the bigger your apparatus needs to be. And that becomes very, very, very difficult. And so, like, a very practical example, right? Like from my life, I've been working with volunteers. I can now say probably my whole life, but at least 20 years, I don't know, a whole life or not, but I've been working a lot with volunteers. And one thing you see that there are different ways to approach volunteers. There's, the usual way is to look at volunteers and say, well, they're a means to an end, right? Like you are free labor. I'm going to use that labor to solve this problem outside there. In service space, we've always looked at it as that it is the means and the end, right? The volunteers, they are serving, and one of the biggest beneficiaries of it is the volunteer themselves, because they are creating an inner transformation within themselves. And what is the value of that? Like, so if you look at it in that way, usually you would have a volunteer, recruitment drive, then you have a figure way out to have volunteer retention, you do volunteer appreciation. And I've just realized, just even forget even service space, like even at my personal level, like I could just go to a random country, I could go to Vietnam, I could go to Austria, I could go to the Philippines. I don't know anybody. I could go to Colombia. These are all places where I've gone. I don't know anybody except for 1 or 2 people hosting me. And all of a sudden, I just make a simple thing that just give with no strings attached. Like, that's the invitation, and I'll do it with you. And all of a sudden, with those who try it, like that kid, it's like initially you're like, maybe not. And then you do it and you're like, oh my God, like that was way more valuable than my most favorite toy. And then you're almost like, like a magnet. You're like, I want to do it again. And, it's like, I didn't think of this before. It seems like somebody helped you do it. Can you help me? And I'm like, sure. And then they go out and they do that, they help somebody else. And so I feel like there's this thing of like, there's this alignment with nature, that this is, when something is ego funded, you have to keep on building up the ego. You have to say, oh, you did a great job. Here's whatever stock options, here's more money. Here's more of this. Here's more fame. Here's more, attention. But when you do it this way, it's almost like it's like nature rewards you. You do an act of kindness, and you don't need any other validation. It's the opposite, and it's just trusting in that allows you to outsource and work much more in coherence with nature. So I find it to be quite interesting to think about how we can perhaps align with the greater patterns and get ourselves out of the way, so that these patterns can actually do their work. And I don't use the language of Tao, but I really like that, because this is a Tao that, as Ray read up front, it's a Tao that cannot be named. As soon as you name it, it's too narrow, right? So I don't know if Reverend Heng Sure, you might have perhaps some stories around that as well.
So Master Hua acquainted us with what he called Dao Li, principles in the Tao. And that word Li is actually a picture of striations in a piece of jade. So it's the way, an element from the earth had these lines in it. Those are the Li, and the Chinese character that's used for the word Li is a picture of jade with the striations. So what that means is that these principles, Dao Li, also called Zhen Li, true principles, are inherent. We come with them. They're the wiring. We're hardwired with these. It's the coding inside our the chips of our own nature, right? So 修道的人, people who cultivate the Tao, who look for these principles, is someone who would unpack and uncover. And the word that we use is cultivate, in order to remove the things that keep me away from living in and being guided by those principles, the way things are, as you said at the top, before thoughts, before words, before thoughts and language. Now, if one were to be someone who has, quote, 正道, realize the way, this is pure Buddhist principle. Here, I'm giving you the teaching here. If we were at all times in harmony with the Tao, they say, 不可虚而离也. You can't leave it behind for even an instant, because there's nowhere that it's not. How come I don't know that? It's because I cover it up with greed, with self, with calculations, with fears, with emotion, etc. So the collective term for that is called ignorance. All the things that keep me without light to see the principles at work in my nature, in your nature, right this minute. When we see them, there's this, aha, my goodness. And I remember there was a quarterback for the 49ers, San Francisco 49ers football. John Brody. And when I was a teenager, glued to the television, watching the 49ers play from faraway California, and I was in the Midwest watching. John Brody was this almost magical quarterback. He had an ability to throw passes that traveled, 40, 50 yards down the field and landed in the hands of the glue-fingered end. His favorite target back in, 56, was a guy named Gene Washington, I remember. And they were playing a game in Minnesota. And it was the 49ers were down by 6 points, and this was their last chance, and a few seconds left in the game. And Gene Washington took off down the field, and Brody dropped back and found his protection and lofted this pass in the air, and it was caught on camera, and the ball soars 10 yards, 20 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards, 60 yards. Gene Washington sticks out his fingers in the end zone, brings the pass in effortlessly. The 49ers win, convert the point after touchdown, and win the game, beat the Minnesota Vikings. And they interviewed Brody afterwards, and he said, I guess maybe I was kind of, in the zone, he said. As I released the football, I saw that there was only one track that ball could make through the air. And as soon as I set that ball on the track, there was no way it was not going to land in Gene Washington's hands. It was, sure enough, that was the only way it could go. And I let it go, and I realized that was where the ball was going. So I just threw it to that spot in the air, knowing that when Gene got there, his hands would be in that spot. Sure enough, he caught the ball, nothing to it, effortless. And everyone's like, you threw a 70-yard pass, and, so is when we give purely, let's say, without a sense of in Buddhism, they talk about emptying out the three aspects of giving. The giver is emptied out, the receiver is emptied out, the gift itself is emptied out, and this is pure giving. So all of the blessings are there. There's no attachment to me as the fantastic benefactor, the famous giver, saved. There's no sense of the receiver being, now in debt to the giver, or super grateful, or unhappy that it wasn't what he wanted, or what all the things that can go wrong with the receiver. And the gift itself only has value in the transaction, in doing the connection, in being the vehicle for the connection. The transaction is not the word. It's the thing whereby the giving is completed. So emptying out the three vehicles, what we discover is the beauty and the joy of pure giving. So I thought that was interesting.
That's amazing.
It is nature at work through us. And most of the time we're too busy to see it. We're too covered over to see it.
Yeah.
And yet those principles are always there for us to find. And when we do, there is joy in the giving.
That's totally amazing. First of all, I love that visual of, like, the 49ers, for the 49ers fans out there, they did lose today, but they'll improve. But yeah, I think it's really quite remarkable that when the quarterback is throwing, making the throw, he doesn't actually know, the receiver's not there. There's like all these things that have to kind of come together. And that's really I think that's a great metaphor for, for living a life of principle, is that even though if you don't see the outcomes right away, it doesn't matter, because you're sort of trusting that at some point the ball is going to travel at the right time and the right place, and the catcher will be there. And you have to, yeah, exactly. So I think there's principle there. And I would what I would add to it, I would just add one thing to it, which is that I don't think this endowment of nature is too far. I don't think we need to sort of say, oh my God, when I achieve these lofty states of samadhi and then I can float on air, and then all of a sudden I'll be able to, maybe to be a good quarterback, yes, you need to do that. But to be a good giver, it's right there. I feel like that possibility of emptying is just around the corner, and we see it all around us. I think we all experience it, even if we don't recognize it. I was watching, to build on your sports metaphor, I remember a soccer game a couple months ago. I wasn't watching it, but there was this guy, the Danish team was playing the Finnish team. And so, and these fans are like, they're really at each other. It was a really meaningful game, important game. Both sides wanted to win. And, this guy, Christian Eriksen, just like collapses on the field, like absolutely collapses. And they have a video of this. I mean, I won't show it here, but I feel like it's a really powerful video. All of a sudden, people don't know what to do. Both sides kind of come together. All the players create a circle. It looks like maybe he's passed away. They don't know what's happened to him. He's just like completely collapsed on the ground. And the fans did something extraordinary. All of a sudden, one side starts chanting, "Christian, Christian," and then in between the gaps, the other side, the opponents, they say his name. So one side, you have tens of thousands of people on one side saying Christian, and the other side, Eriksen, Christian, Eriksen. And you have these, I don't know, probably something like 60,000 people in unison, and it was completely uncoordinated. It was like, wow, I see somebody suffering. And yes, I have my affiliations. Yes, I have my identities, but this is something much more important than even those identities. And so you tap into that greater oneness, and all of a sudden there's a collective response. And there's a YouTube video of this. And so I think the question that we can ask ourselves is, how do we arrange ourselves? Just as we do in what is a social permaculture, if you want to think about it with a farming metaphor? How do we arrange ourselves in a way that we allow for the greatest harmonization with the Tao and the greatest circulation of virtue inside of us and inside of other people, and then collectively, synergistically at a much more greater capacity? And I think that's it's a really powerful question to kind of reflect on.
So I have a thought about that, and it has to, we're out now energizing whole societies, but it starts with an example. It starts with being the goodness that you want to see. And just at the time when I was assuming that to be a real man, I had to be tough and macho. I had to be like John Wayne, be as tough as my saddle, and that was the way to be a man. I got a lesson that was not the case. And it was an awareness of the first step on the path, the real path. And it came from my father. And my father had a baritone ukulele. It was, I wish I still had it. It was beautiful, all mahogany ukulele. And it was anything that my father had, I wanted, you know, and I really gave him a lot of affliction. He would say, keep your hands off my stuff. Every time I go reach for something, I find your hand there under mine. He said, just mind your own stuff, you know, leave my stuff alone. Because I was really, you know, I was in my search for what is strength, what is the right way to be a man. I wanted to imitate my father in all ways. And I went overboard, and he had a stack of books that he was reading by his bedside table. And as soon as he went off to work, I would sneak them and take them upstairs and read them and put them back before he got home. You know, I wanted his thoughts as well as his strength. So he told me not to mess with his baritone uke. But of course, you know, once I heard that dum 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 dum, I could play music. Music came out of this thing. It was he came home, there I was playing it. Oh, he blew up. I told you another. And I was really crushed because he, you know, my dad was a big, strong guy. But anyway, my birthday came up about 2 weeks later. And I think he felt bad for having scolded me as hard as he had. And so on my birthday morning, I came down, there was the baritone uke with a big red bow on it and a card. And the card said, may the music that you make with this instrument never replace the music in your heart, he said.
Oh.
And so I picked it up, and I was, you know, crying. I looked at my dad, and he had tears in his eyes. And Dad was not one to cry easily. You know, he's a big Canadian five sport athlete, and, you know, tough guy. And yet I connected immediately that giving that touched the heart and came from the heart was soft. Seeing how his heart had melted in the process of giving me the baritone ukulele. And you know, so that was, I think, heading out to transforming society with generosity and kindness begins with modeling.
Yeah.
You have to see somebody do it. So macho-ness, from macho-ness to heartfulness is part of the journey.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I think as we close, that was very touching, Reverend Heng Sure. And as we close, I want to share a story, and then we can do some Q&A here. In between, we'll have a song. Hopefully, one more. We'll put Reverend Heng Sure on the spot. But I want to share a story, and I think it's to this question that Reverend Heng Sure was kind of pointing to, which is, you know, what's the reason to get out of bed every morning, right? Like, what is it that, and especially in the pandemic, you know, one of our friends, Adam Grant, gave this TED talk, and he spoke about this word languishing, how it's like, you're not happy, you're not sad, you're just kind of blah, you know, man. And there's this sense of collective languishing, and there's this other scholar, this thinker, Yuval Noah Harari. He writes. He has a very interesting page in his book, Homo Deus, and he says there's this chapter on the deal of modernity, and he says the deal of modernity is that we trade meaning for power. That back in the days, like when it rained, it was like, we didn't know why it rained and when it was going to rain. You sort of surrender to the gods, you know. When you had the plague, when you had the smallpox, you're praying. When you know, a king is ordained, you kind of assume that it's this divine ordination, you know, that goes behind it. And now over time, we have all this technological progress, scientific progress, informational progress, like everything is at our disposal. And we're not thinking, okay, COVID has come and now let's pray so we get the vaccine. We're thinking, how do you get the most R&D budget into all of these pharmaceutical companies? And so he says that really the deal of modernity is kind of simple. You trade meaning for power. And if you do that a whole lot, then you feel like, wow, well, I know exactly why things are happening the way they are. But then you've lost any sort of meaning around it. And I think this is what Adam Grant is pointing to, particularly in the pandemic. It's so accentuated, is this idea of languishing, neither up nor down, just kind of hollow. It's not emptiness the way Reverend Heng Sure or any good Buddhist monk might describe this remarkable state of fullness, which you can describe as emptiness, but it's this, So, I think that's a question to ask for all of us. Like, hey, what's the reason to get out of bed? And one of my friends in high school, here's the story. It really touched me, actually, this story. It's similar to the one I had shared earlier. He got dumped by his, I think, this girlfriend, and he was really sad, and he didn't talk to anybody about it. But mom, like, kind of saw him at at home, moping around, kind of knew what was going on, but didn't ask. She didn't want to intrude. It was a high school kid, and at some point, mom feels bad for the son, and mom tells him, he says, son, whatever you want in life, you should make sure you give it. That's the best way to have it.
Wow.
So if you want love, be sure to give love.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's this high school kid without too much complication. He kind of thought of an idea. He says, okay, I'm going to try to wake up every morning, because he didn't even feel like wait. It was like, you're kind of in this place where you're just like, you're stuck, right? You're depressed, you're down and out. And so he would wake up every morning, and his goal in life for that day was to make somebody's day, to give love. And he decided to do an act of kindness every day and make sure that it doesn't repeat.
Wow.
And so he would go and mow the neighbor's lawn. He would go and put a rose inside of, or a flower inside of somebody's newspaper back in those days when you used to get newspapers. He would do all these things. And then it just became a habit. And he did this for 3 straight years.
Wow.
And his life started to have a very different outlook. And one fine day, he is on a pier, and he sees this woman with another man who is kind of confronting her. She's not comfortable. And just in the spirit of kindness, he goes and stands next to this woman. And he said, and the woman looks at that intimidating guy, and the intimidating guy looks at this new guy. He's like, are you guys together? And they don't even know each other, but she's like, wow, that guy looks way more nicer guy than this guy, right? She's like, yeah, we're together. And, they ended up getting married, actually. It's a true story. That's not the moral of the story, especially when you're with a monk, but this idea of exercising, it's like seeing compassion, generosity, all virtue as like a muscle. The more you practice it, the more you have it in your life. And the more we do that, then you have these remarkable models of the bodhisattvas that actually show us how this can be done, right?
Yeah. So if giving is, as they say, 助人是快乐之本, if giving is the source of happiness, then imagine how happy Guanyin Bodhisattva must be with 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes. The ability to give happiness the way Guanyin can give happiness is just, you can imagine. And so one of the great promises of Guanyin Bodhisattva is that every time we recite her name, we become one of Guanyin Bodhisattva's hands. So I have a Mississippi John Hurt tune, which will help folks remember. Bodhisattva, Namo Guan Shi Yin. You will always come to save us from the troubles that we're in. With 1,000 eyes to see me and 1,000 ears to hear. With 1,000 hands to help me, you say, my friends, have no fear. Namo Guan Yin Bodhisattva, Namo Guan Shi Yin. You will always come to save us from the troubles that we're in. You will always come to save us from the troubles that we're in.
Thank you very much. This is such a beautiful conversation. And I'd like to just inject, we have some questions that may be answered. But before that, I'd like to inject a couple points, just what I've listened. I think I want to elaborate what Nipun says. I was fully inspired by you, by the small act of kindness as you practice. Since you were very young, I mean, I know you for almost, lots of years. And I will remember one time we were in Taipei. You and Bob Block were giving a talk. And after talk, we went to a place to have shaved ice. And guess what? You walk in there, take out all your, what they give you for your talk, right? You put the whole thing on the table, say, pay for everybody else behind us. And Bob Block was inspired and put his share in too, right? and that was, and nobody knows. People were talking about who was paying for us and all that. And we see the joy in people's face. I mean, that's tremendous. But one of the person who were with us was Chen Yuxiang, the famous pianist of CTD. You remember that? She was so inspired. So during her mother's birthday, they went to a restaurant, and she told the waitress, for the rest of the people before noon, I paid for them all. Wow. She paid for 70 dinners. And she told me later on, it was the happiest day in her life. Wow. All right. I mean, just small acts. And Dhamma Master talk about, Li Yun Da Tong Pian, right? Confucius' big vision. But in Europe, there's such thing going on too, except it's in the community village level called Village Green, right? In every village, there's a place called Village Green. People come on Sunday and share their wear and donate things, exchange for free. And that's the kind of spirit that we all have, all right? And I think once you reach a state like the generosity and things like, you reach a state of sort of in the zone, like you talk about the famous quarterback.
John Brody. Yeah.
Yeah. I admire Johnny Unitas.
Oh,
when I was young. Right?
Me too. He was my favorite.
Yeah. And I do remember a story myself in a high school competition, basketball competition. And we have 3 seconds left. I hit the ball in the middle of the court. We're down by 1 point. And suddenly I feel no one is near. Then that basket looks so big. So I just easily put the 2 points in and we won by a point. Wow. And that was, so this wonderful moment you two share is so phenomenal that all of us have. And generosity is inherent in all of us. So finding a meaning, you don't have to look for it. The meaning is in you, and you just have to let it be, so to speak. And we have a couple questions from the audience. One of the question is, how do we deal with unreasonable people who want to cheat us or doing things like that? How do we deal with that?
I'll let Nipun go first.
No, I was gonna go the other way. Yeah, no, I think for me, the biggest practice that I've had with people that I can't deal with, because if you look at it on paper, you read Master Hua stories, you're like, wow, man, this guy was able to be generous and kind and turn conditions that were just seemed impossible. And you have to realize, okay, well, I'm not Master Hua, but I can still use the principles to the degrees that I can. And if you can't, you have to be honest about it. But how do you hold that space? And I would say for me personally, I like the framing of not now instead of no. So a no is, look, you're a terrible person and I don't want you in my circle. And even if that feels true in that moment, you never know. Tomorrow you might be a different person, and tomorrow your understanding of why the other person was misbehaving might be very different as well. And so I think what helps me is to go from no, you still draw the boundary, which feels right for you. But instead of doing it in a harsh way with a no, the not now helps soften my gaze and say, these not in these conditions right now, but who knows what happens in the future. And maybe it doesn't come to pass in the future. Maybe that was it. That was the only time those conditions came together, and poof, they kind of disappear. And it was a great idea to draw a skillful boundary. Or maybe you transform, or the other person transforms, and you become noble friends down the road. You never know. And you leave open that possibility. So I found it helpful to move into my internal radar when you're dealing with difficult people, or people. There's no difficult people. I would say people who are being difficult in that moment, because we all have mind states that arise where we are difficult for other people, And so when that arises, okay, not now, and that just makes it a little gentler, a little softer, and a little bit more compassionate.
Yeah, good.
Well, there's another question that somebody from Canada specifically asked Nipun, how does she start a karma kitchen?
Well,
she owns a restaurant.
I wanted to see if Reverend Heng Sure had something to add to the first question, and then I'll be happy to answer that.
That's a perfectly round answer. If we let that be, then we can get more questions in. Okay. I can't improve on your answer.
Okay. Reverend Heng Sure, I'm just copy pasting all the things I've heard at the staircases of the monastery over the years. So it's good. You're right. I copied well. So Karma Kitchen is this idea. In fact, when we held the first one, Reverend Heng Sure was right there. Do you remember Reverend Heng Sure?
I certainly do.
Yeah,
a taste of the Himalayas.
Yeah. Same owner in a smaller
Telegraph Avenue.
Yeah, it was at that time. It was on Telegraph. It was a branch of Taste of Himalayas.
The first one. Yeah,
you were. And the idea is, it's actually a monastic idea, right? That the idea is, I never frame it like that, but since I'm talking with Reverend Heng Sure, I'm in my monastic mode right now. The principle is that giving begets more giving, that actually giving people an opportunity to give is way stronger. So Karma Kitchen, you walk in and your check reads zero. It's zero because someone before you has paid for you. And you are trusted to pay forward. So in a very micro way, it's sort of the story Reverend Heng Sure shared about his dad. Like, he is singing today because of the ukulele that was delivered, and not just the ukulele, also the tears of transformation that it was wrapped in, right? That, even so many years later, Reverend Heng Sure was almost in tears remembering that. And so it's very much alive in the heart. And so how can you take an ordinary transaction where you go in and you say, this is mine, this is owed to me, it's a me experience, and how do you broaden that into a we experience? So go to karmakitchen.org and just drop us a note if you want logistical information. They just started one last week in Bangalore, and it's just a great way to turn something that's transactional and to say, no, look, you have received first, and now you are trusted to pay forward whatever you want for people after you. Most people think that does not work, that cannot work. We have actually seen, UC Berkeley did this seminal research they published a seminal research paper, and the title of it was Paying More when paying for others, which is really going back to that same story of the kid saying, oh, can I do that again? But we don't have enough examples of that in society. We've lost faith in generosity. We've lost faith in the Tao, I would say. And so this becomes a way to turn something so ordinary, like just having a meal, so transactional, like this is what I pay, this is what I get, and turning it into a possible experience with the Tao. And I think that's powerful.
Well, I want to inject another story that during the same trip in Taipei, after you left, a friend of mine and I have coffee in one of the coffee shops. And he was talking about, so inspired by you. I said, why don't you do something? And so he went to the coffee shop owner and said, we want to donate so many coffee, I don't know, 100 cups of coffee or something like that. And you just put on the wall. Everybody can come in. If they don't have money, they can order a cup of coffee from the wall. And he later on went to the headquarters of the coffee chain and talked to them. All right. So, I mean, little ripples get brought out.
So
here's
hey,
another,
Ray.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. There's a question on in the chat. How do we translate Karma Kitchen into Chinese? 业力厨房还是业力厨房? How would you translate 业力厨房? Karma Kitchen, meaning good karma.
Good karma, yeah. 业力
你的业力
厨房 yeah.
Is that a good, is that sounds scary?
Yeah,
it sounds like a negative karma kitchen. Yeah. So 善业厨房, maybe 善业厨房.
善业厨房, oh, 善业厨房, that sounds great. Yeah.
Online says 善业厨房. Okay, we got
that's great.
We got Karma Kitchen in Chinese now.
Awesome.
And there's another question. What's the difference between greed and wishing for more?
Reverend Heng Sure, over to you this time.
So do you know when you're full at lunch? If so, that's neat.
Yeah.
And if you override that full feeling when you see that second piece of chocolate cake, and happens to be your very, very favorite, and if you override it and you go ahead and eat it, chances are you've deprived somebody else of their piece, but your stomach says, oh, I shouldn't have. I can't believe I ate the whole thing, right? That's greed. So you don't have to ask. You can know yourself. What is need and greed? If you happen to like cream and sugar in your coffee, put in half spoonful, put in 3 spoonfuls of sugar.
No, yeah.
It was good. It was good before. By the 3rd spoonful, you don't want to drink it. That's greed.
The other person have a good name also for Karma Kitchen, kind of 善妙坊 means great and wonderful kitchen.
善妙厨房. Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we got the name. Let's get the restaurant.
Get it going, right?
Yeah.
Well, I want to another. I didn't see the question. Yeah.
There's an anti-Asian hate. You want to ask that question from YouTube?
No, I didn't see it. Let's see.
I can read it. It's about 850.
Oh, what advice would you give to counter anti-Asian hate consumed in this country, personally for women and violence in the society in general?
So what advice would you give to counter anti-Asian hate consuming this country, personally for women and violence in the society in general? I'd like to hear Nipun's answer too. One thing is to put it in context, and it's my ancestors were Irish, and on one side, and Scottish on the other, And when the Irish came in, the fear was that they would take all the jobs. So the Irish were called Micks, and everybody hated them. There were anti-Irish riots because there were so many Irish immigrants. That time passed, and following the Irish, there were the Vietnamese, and there was this sense of, oh my God, the Vietnamese are, and the Irish have now filtered their way into society. The Vietnamese have filtered their way up into society, professional job. Probably your dentist is Vietnamese, Vietnamese American, having been 2 and 3 and 4 generations now. So I think the anti-Asian violence is a function of that. It's our turn. If you're more visible, suddenly you can be more of a threat. But I think just that it's happening is also a function of the last 4 years. The last, resident of the White House was liberal in his calling, the Kung flu, calling the coronavirus, labeling it as the Wuhan flu and stuff. So that didn't help. But it's a historical moment. And if you're more visible, you can be a threat. But I think we have to be patient and stand firm. And if I were Asian parents and I had kids, I would teach them martial arts. I would enroll my kids in self-defense. How we respond to how the Irish responded, how the Vietnamese responded, was to stand firm, stand strong, don't run away, and don't come back with hate, come back with Aikido, which is to neutralize the punch, and to let the energy coming at you be absorbed and emptied out. In Tai Chi Chuan, we have this thing called pushing hands and Tui Shou. And you stand your ground by emptying out the force coming at you. So I think to be the model minority, if that means you're submissive, not necessarily. You stand strong, you stand firm, and you don't hate back. Then it will end. And the next immigrants, maybe it'll be the Afghanis coming in next, who knows? So that's, Nipun, what's your thought on it?
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful metaphor of Aikido and pushing hands. I really like that. I think it's having a strong back and a soft heart is another way I've heard that. And I think, for me, I remember I was in Italy one time and I saw this guy go up on stage who's since become a friend. His name is Jacques Verdouin, and he does a lot of work with prisoners. And it left a real strong impression on me that day, because what he shared, so he works with people who have committed incredible crimes, and and most of them are in for life. And at one point he he got a little blackboard and he drew 2 columns, and he says, you guys are all in here for horrible crimes. What did how long was, first column was, he says, how many years have you been here? How many years are you locked up for? Like 45 years, 23 years, 11 years. He added them up. In the second column, he says, how long was your moment of rage that led to your action, which then got you here? And it was like 30 seconds or 2 minutes or an hour. And he added it up, and he's like, for a couple of hours collectively, we have spent hundreds of years here. And in that circle, just seeing that mirrored that way, all the inmates at some point got very introspective. And he says, one of them says, you know what? I think, well, you know what I think? And he says, what? And he says, I think hurt people hurt people.
Right.
And then they went around, and there was someone else in the circle that says, I'd like to add to that. And he says, healed people heal people. And so this Aikido between like staying firm and, also, doing this other move with them is like, it's like soft, strong back, soft heart is really, I think, the way. How do you keep a soft heart in those positions? I think you do that we understand the strong back part, but the soft heart, I think you do that by realizing that there are many causes and conditions that we don't know, and that there's a whole series of hurt. And when I look at, Reverend Heng Sure, is like, you read his bowing journals, you cannot be the same human being. I mean, anybody who reads those bowing journals, and I have read them, so I'm speaking from direct experience. I mean, not every single one, but I've read a lot of it. And they modeled this, they modeled it. There are all these people like, what if somebody comes and pours orange juice on your head and you're like bowing for world peace? And what if somebody spits in your face? What if 3 times at gunpoint? How do you respond? And okay, you do the right thing, you do the skillful thing in that moment, but what's going on in your heart? And what I read, which was so inspiring, was that in their heart they're saying, they're really realizing that there's a long chain of causes and conditions. And so I think it's a big journey. It's a tough journey. And it's a journey that some of us are thrown into in various different ways. But it can also be an incredible opportunity for personal growth as well, while we do the external work of being skillful.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Our time is about up. We're over time a little bit, but there's one more question, which is very meaningful. When do you know you have enough to live and have basics fulfilled? Is it then time to walk away from a job and find what you love to do?
That's
Heng Sure, how did you become a monk?
The best answer is to watch your feet. Where are you walking? Once you put it above the neck, once you start debating, it's endless. You'll never, because you say, when do you know you've had enough to live and your basics are fulfilled? When is it to know when it's time to walk away from a job and find out what you love to do, volunteer, cultivate, etc.? Watch your feet. Especially habits are strong, and if you're still supposed to be there, your feet will be under your desk. If it's time to walk away, you will already be on the path. And rationalizations and getting that debate going inside is endless. And sometimes you just have to keep walking. So a change. You want to make sure, you want to look and see who's dependent upon you, who's under the umbrella you're holding, before you decide to unfurl, pull in the umbrella and jump overboard. If there are people in there with you, you need to be responsible to the commitments you've made. But watch your feet; they won't lie.
It reminds me of, sorry, Ray, I know we're over, but actually reminds me that when I was younger, I would often say, okay, I think I want to become a monk. And I don't think it was Reverend Heng Sure, but it was another Hindu monk that told me something very interesting, because I said, should I become a monk or should I kind of, be in the world? What should I do? And it's a similar kind of question, not in the same way, but it's this, like, you don't know what to do. You don't know what's higher. Is this better? And this monk said something really, it was like a tender but firm slap on the face at that time. He said, if you're asking the question, you're not ready.
Yeah.
And what I had done at the time is I thought, oh, I'm not ready, so I'm not good enough. But now I look back at my life and I realized I just made that up about being good enough and not good enough, right? It's actually just that we all have a different spot on the spectrum where we need to play our role in integrity with our deepest calling. And so what is that spot on the spectrum for you? And that's where I think Reverend Heng Sure's advice of like, hey, follow your feet, watch your feet, which is to say, really watch your intuition. Where does your entire apparatus, not just your thoughts, but the entire apparatus of mind-body phenomena, where is that leading to? Where is that organically going? And that's the spot you need to be. And I don't think there's a higher or lower or better or worse. That's just a spot. Suffering is everywhere. So there's no escaping it until we awaken, right? That's what I've learned, Reverend Heng Sure. Did I get it right?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Well, thank you both for the wonderful session today. And I think our time is up. And next week, we have two wonderful speakers, Rabbi David Barron from Los Angeles, as well as Dr. Marilyn Schlitz, and who has written many books, and including films. And so I wonder whether, before we leave, Reverend Heng Sure can bestow us a transfer of merit or other songs that we can conclude this wonderful session.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ray, again. And thanks, Nipun. You know, don't want to say thank you because you don't thank yourself, but I feel like this has been a tremendous gift to me to be able to listen to your stories, Nipun, your principles, and also join with folks' questions online. And we had 270 plus people.
282, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and then on YouTube, probably more than that. That's just great. So what I'd like to do is continue the giving banquet and give a Buddhist mantra from Medicine Buddha. This is truly a Han Chuan Fo Jiao de Gongxian. This is from the Chinese Mahayana tradition. Medicine Buddha gives us a mantra that when it goes out, it puts us in harmony with the Tao in terms of healing. So we do it in Sanskrit, and I'd like to invite folks to take all of they call it the faxi, the joy of Dharma that comes from joining together with wholesome friends in an evening like this. Thanks to Ray and Priscilla for setting it up, and to CTDB, Dharma Master Jin Yong and his volunteer team for making it possible. All of that goodness we can actually share with our minds. Send it out with a wish, whatever goodness you would like to do. In Judaism, they call it tikkun olam. We repair the world with this energy. Medicine Buddha's energy is what does the work for us, but we have to send our wishes out. Here we go. Please make your own wish. Om Namo Bhagavate Saja Guru Vaidurya Pravarajaya Tathagataya Arahate Samyak Sambuddhaya Tadyata Om Asaje Asaja Samudate Swaha.
Thank you very much, Reverend Heng Sure and Nipun and everybody else. Good evening.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Reverend Heng Sure.
Thanks, Nipun. See ya.
Bye.
Dharma Master Jin Yong, would you have something to say?
No, it's fine. Yeah. It's a very good session today. I think many people
Well, thank
really
you.
enjoyed it.
I appreciate Dharma Master Jin Yong's guidance in making this session happening.
It's all your idea. Okay, good night.
Good night.
Everyone.